All right. Okay, our next speaker is Rose McKinney-James. She's a seasoned small business leader, a clean energy advocate, and independent corporate director with a long history in public service, nonprofit volunteerism, and private sector corporate social responsibility. Her firms provide business consulting services and advocacy in the areas of public affairs, energy policy, and economic and sustainable development. She'll be speaking to us today about the importance of collaboration in sustaining the West. Okay, thank you. Rose.
Well, thank you, Ben. If you resist change, you fail. Evolve or dissolve. Innovate or evaporate. These are just a few of the borrowed phrases that inspire me each and every day. But I am really delighted to join you, and I appreciate the invitation from Megan to participate. This is my first trip to Logan, Utah, my first Restoring the West conference. And I found the conference to be exceptional on many levels, and I've enjoyed meeting many of you over the course of these 2 days. And I hope to add a bit of context and texture from a slightly different vantage point. But how awesome to have the opportunity to step completely out of my comfort zone to observe a group of professionals so deeply steeped in the wide range of issues that relate to managing our public lands. You are comfortable with trees and fish and forests and species and habitats and horses and wilderness. You are scientists and academics, professors and PhDs. You speak to hydrology, recreational infrastructure, fire, ecosystems, rivers, and Medusa head, something or other, seeds, and evapotranspiration. I even met my first vegetation ecologist, my friend Jeff from Montana. You were immersed in seeking answers to balancing the interest of a changing demographic of public land users and facing challenges unique to land use. I, on the other hand, am a totally urban chick. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I have a law degree, and I've held positions that are traditionally desk jobs. I'm an advocate, a lobbyist, a consultant, and as I'm trained as a lawyer, I spent my early career working with community-based organizations focused on economic development projects. As a cabinet secretary leading the Nevada Department of Business and Industry, I had the unique opportunity to leave the familiar surroundings of Las Vegas and travel to Elko and Winnemucca to complete several rural tours, observing the rich ranching and agricultural resources that are abundant throughout my adopted state. I understand the planting patterns of alfalfa, garlic, and potatoes, and the role of the leaf cutter bee. I've been included in tours of several of our underground mining operations. I know just enough about the desert tortoise, a little more now about the sage grouse, and mining reclamation to get through a weekend meeting of the Western Governors Association. I am a self-proclaimed policy wonk. I do policy. I've been working on policy for the better part of 2 decades, and as you can see, I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm the seminar speaker, and this is my lecture. However, if you hang in with me, I have a gift. This gift will come to you at the end. Is that fair? Okay. The focus of my work has been on advancing opportunities to increase the use of renewable resources for our energy needs. And this policy work has explored both the barriers and incentives necessary to support the development of solar, wind, geothermal, and biomass projects in states where these resources are plentiful. So I must admit that I was pretty surprised when Megan literally tracked me down after reading an op-ed that I authored for the High Desert News. And after working for years to establish a policy framework for developing solar projects on public lands, I was incredibly disappointed to see a new direction emerge with an emphasis on enhancing increased opportunities for oil and gas development. So I decided to speak up. To my surprise, I was recruited to work in collaboration with the Wilderness Society to advance my voice and offer a perspective that includes renewable resource development. The Wilderness Society was looking at collaboration a bit differently and through the lens of climate change. They described this approach in the following way, and I took this from their website. Shining a light on the nation's blind spot, public land. Bringing our public lands energy development into the 21st century will require a smart and forward-thinking approach. As leaders set targets for reducing U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, they must address the blind spot, the role that public lands play in climate change. A sustainable future also requires continuing to reform how energy leasing takes place on our lands, as well as seeing to it that our country stays on a path for a cleaner energy future. End quote. So I'm here today with a message. This ain't your grandma's public lands management. Change is inevitable. And the path forward, the path to the future, will be based on thoughtful, creative, and strategic collaboration. If you resist change, you fail. Evolve or dissolve. Innovate or evaporate. So just what is this culture of collaboration? As I mentioned, I'm from Nevada, and Nevada has been a leader in advancing renewable energy in the West, and I've been working in concert with a variety of organizations over these years in the clean energy space and in a variety of capacities to advance the commercial deployment of renewables in Nevada and the West. A critical strategy to achieving this goal was to use a balanced approach in the identification of sites to exploit the resources while balancing the importance of conservation, leveraging the local and state economic development benefits, supporting the environment, and harnessing the clean air and health benefits inherent in clean energy choices. Working with legislative leaders and decision makers, our collective efforts have been focused on achieving this balance between conservation and renewable energy development on public land. I'm not sure that you mentioned this, but I am a former regulator, and I fully recognize the challenge of bringing diverse viewpoints together toward achieving this balance. And I applaud the conservation community for its willingness and dedication to this conversation. And while renewable developers are not always in full accord on all things, and specifically the challenges of siting choices, this is the hardest part. But we've achieved a strong record of success with responsible renewable energy development on public lands. And clean energy is the future and will assist in providing the much-needed technology and innovation required to modernize the grid, bringing significant stability and resilience. Policies governing energy development on our public lands should recognize the importance of this transition and help foster responsible development. This includes the appropriate and equitable collection of royalty revenues. What we need generally is both a timely and responsible development of these resources. We have many examples of this, and we enjoy a strong track record of success. Over the course of this conference, I've detected a theme. an emphasis on the value of collaboration, community and stakeholder engagement and outreach. And this is what I've heard so far relative to collaboration. There are examples of community-engaged education. The High Desert Partnership has placed an emphasis on thoughtful and strategic collaboration. There are questions about collaborations being used successfully to buffer or to diffuse outside agitation. The opportunity for coordinated resource planning used as a foundation and a network to support similar collaborations. So buried within the term collaboration is the word lab. Lab, short for laboratory, experimentation. Collaboration between industry, advocates, environmental leaders, and federal land use officials has played a critical role in this development. And this experimentation has produced several examples of how collaboration proved to be the difference in the ability to complete projects so beneficial to reducing carbon and addressing the impacts of climate. Technology, innovation, creative solutions have been the guiding force behind much of the progress made in developing renewable resources on public land. However, recent federal policy shifts may serve to dismantle and interrupt this progress. Support for creating increased public awareness and engagement, underscoring the importance of collaboration, is the key to success of future efforts. In Nevada, we undertook an experimental effort which was an attempt to balance diverse stakeholder interest, working with the federal government on a comprehensive program to identify the most appropriate siting for solar development, resulting in the creation of solar energy zones, or SEZ. And here's how the BLM described it. And this again is a quote. As part of the solar energy program, the BLM has identified specific locations that are well suited for utility scale production of solar energy, where the BLM proposes to prioritize development about 285,000 acres. The program emphasizes and incentivizes development within the solar energy zones and outlines a collaborative process for identifying additional zones. They continue. Land within the dry lake solar energy zones in Nevada is undeveloped scrubland, characteristic of semi-arid basin vegetation within the SEZ, which is predominantly creosote bush. Okay, Derek, I tried. Creosote bush and other low scrubs. Land within and near the SEZ contain multiple transmission lines and related facilities, several power plants and other industrial facilities, mining operations, I-40, other roads, and a railroad. In addition, there is debris scattered throughout the solar enterprise zone. So the National Park Service said it relies on many of the recent studies that were conducted to inform policy, in which climate change is one factor among others in decision-making. According to them, it is our job to understand and know how to manage the effects from a changing climate so that we can protect park resources, just as we manage the impacts of invasive species or erosion or wildfire. The agency said it's reviewing additional studies that speak to natural events that take place outside of the climate change conversation, such as wildfires caused by humans. When the current administration initiated an energy dominance agenda a little over 1 year ago, its premise was that removing barriers to oil and gas development on public lands would, quote, bring true prosperity and wealth to our people. In reality, I believe this approach opened the doors to increased pollution, greater restrictions on access to public lands, and damage to vital wildlife habitat. However, what may have been more directly benefited was the bottom line of a few private oil and gas companies. The emphasis on developing oil and gas on public lands also limited opportunities for developing clean energy resources. My work during my tenure as a commissioner allowed me to witness firsthand the success of collaborative development of renewable energy on public lands. I referenced the Dry Lake Solar Energy Zone outside of Las Vegas. It now is home to 179 megawatts of solar projects on public lands, with more on the way. This is so thanks to the leadership of the Bureau of Land Management and developers, responsible developers like First Solar and Invenergy, and conservation groups who saw the twin needs to accelerate the transition to renewable energy and also protect public lands. This is evolution. Yesterday, when Ben Cate offered his impressive talk, he focused on the value of collaboration. It's true that utility-scale projects are big. The two projects in the Dry Lake Zone cover the equivalent of 1,360 NFL football fields. So finding the right places for them is important. And to do that, the BLM collaborates with regulators, developers, and other stakeholders looking for lower conflict areas that are near existing roads and transmission lines. And the Dry Lake Zone, for example, is surrounded by multiple transmission lines, several solar and natural gas power plants, mining operations, a landfill, several major highways, and again, that railroad. So far, there are 19 solar energy zones in 6 southwestern states, and that together with other designated renewable energy zones encompass 700,000 acres. And then there are the economic development benefits. To date, the Dry Lake solar projects have created 1,300 jobs and produced enough clean energy to meet the consumption needs of 46,000 homes, while negating emissions equal to taking nearly 52,000 cars off the road. In Nevada, the BLM is now looking to expand the solar zone and identify other southern parts of the state, giving residents hope that this kind of smart planning for renewables will continue despite the proposals to cut the agency's budget for renewable energy almost in half. So when it comes to oil and gas development, however, the administration is moving away from the collaborative process that allowed for public involvement. And though the oil and gas industry is already sitting on nearly 8,000 unused drilling permits and tying up 14 million acres for multiple uses, what we see is an attempt to give access to private oil and gas companies to develop an additional 11.6 million acres of public lands. Some are close to national parks and within sensitive wildlife habitats and culturally significant landscapes. And further, in removing critical land use planning regulations and cutting the public out of the decision-making, these plans ignore the obligation for transparency and balanced management of public lands. To be clear, I am not suggesting that we eliminate oil and gas development. This is about ensuring the smart and inclusive decision-making we expect when it comes to major changes on our public lands. Elevating fossil fuel development on public lands above any other activity degrades the significant progress that we've made in improving air and water quality, and it significantly contributes to our already warming planet. I believe that there is a tremendous upside to revisiting a focus on renewable energy development, but the reality is that the market tells all. Consumers are making cleaner choices, and demand for fossil fuels continues to decline, while renewable energy production climbs and job growth is at a record high, with solar jobs now actually outnumbering jobs in natural gas. Earlier this year, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to join a diverse panel of Westerners to ask the Congress to restore public involvement in the decision-making process for energy development on public lands. In my view, the process needs to involve the public more and not less. And it needs to increase transparency and accountability. And we need to ensure that local communities and constituencies are consulted and engaged early in the process. I trust that you listen carefully to the lessons learned as outlined by both Professor Grant and Sasha Stortz today. Their experience underscores the importance of community engagement. Public lands are owned by and should benefit all Americans. My colleagues in the conservation and clean energy community are optimistic. We are pleased with the collaborative work undertaken with the BLM to establish solar zones in Nevada and other western states that have already identified other zones, as well and ready for development in the Southwest. Additional prospects remain. The development of renewable resources, wind, solar, and geothermal, should not be excluded or minimized in an effort to advance oil and gas, and I believe that policies that attempt to do so are just flat wrong. Finally, I need to emphasize the improving economics of clean energy. Declining costs have made renewable energy the winning option in utility resource competitions across the country. We are on a path to renewables as the majority of the portfolio. Well-managed public lands and the prudent use of balanced policies will play a significant role to bringing this to fruition, and amongst others, the Royalty Policy Commission and the administration should help build on that success. I hope that we can work collaboratively to reduce our reliance on fossil fuel development, increase the use of renewable resources, and find effective strategies that serve to put the public back into public lands. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share this perspective. If you resist change, you fail. Evolve or dissolve. Innovate or evaporate. And my gift? My gift to you is the gift of time. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have any questions?
You talked a lot about renewable energy, and I was just wondering how nuclear energy is being incorporated in this.
Well, nuclear energy has a plant structure that is very different from the traditional renewables. So wind and solar, geothermal, and biomass don't require the significant plant investment that you'd have for a freestanding nuclear plant. I'm not sure that I can envision a nuclear plant on public land. Yes?
You talked a lot about the BLM, a little bit about the Wilderness Society, and maybe one or two other players. Can you mention a little bit about the process that you went through and some of the other players that might have been involved, some of the maybe smaller players? Because I'm guessing if it's a collaborative effort, there must have been a lot of other folks involved.
Yeah, lots of other folks. So other aspects of the federal government, from forestry, everything within the BLM and Interior, the Interior Department, working closely with BLM to sort of figure out a process for public lands. And then at the local level, a wide range of NGOs, industry representatives, trade associations, people like me who regulators, just a really wide range of voices and stakeholders to come to terms with how to move forward. Public lands in the West, obviously very significant. In Nevada, I think well over 80% of our land is federally owned, so we have lots of public land.
Then the second part, the timeline,
So it took a number of years. I think for the Dry Lake project, I think it began in 2015. So it took a number of years. Oh, the other agencies that are involved obviously are the state agencies. So the Governor's Office of Energy and our environmental agencies at the state level. As far as my involvement is concerned, my main focus was at the legislature to try to convince decision makers that this was a process that we should embrace. And so meeting individually, helping them to understand using data points, the economic development benefits of advancing renewables on public lands was part of the role that I play, and that's what I do in my consulting practice. Somebody in the back, and it's, oh, hi, Gloria. Look.
When you drive by the Dry Lake project and drive by the Dry Lake project and drive by the Dry Lake project, the size of it is very intimidating, and it's hard to imagine where you could put that size of a facility in different places in the Southwest. So I wonder if you've considered smaller facilities and linking smaller facilities in some of the sites that you've discussed.
I think you make an extremely valuable point, and the answer is yes. The issues around scope and size are part of the priority of determining what the scope of the project is going to be. So yes, if there are other opportunities, you may well see much smaller projects. There is, however, a critical mass in terms of a utility scale project in terms of megawatts, and so size is definitely a consideration. Gloria.
Trends indicate that centralized power sources are becoming a thing of the past. Huge mega utility corporations, and the trend is going to be more decentralized and almost maybe a smaller community or smaller sources for house-centered. How do you see large arrays or sources on public lands dovetailing, interacting, or hindering or exacerbating that?
So I think the answer is that planning will be far more strategic. Distributed generation has become far more active, as you described, so rooftop solar. But the grid is still a large entity. And so citing renewables, solar and wind in particular, to help create more resilience and reliability on the grid, either due to proximity or increasing, see, I'm not an engineer or an electrical person, but there are technical aspects of this that allow for an improved grid based on where and how you site these projects. So there is a balance to be maintained. And the traditional central coal plant is definitely a dinosaur. Oh, yay. Thank you.
Question? No more questions?
Oh.
Anybody? Oh, in the back.
Any advice on how to bring more of these ideas to Utah?
Well, Nevada's not that far away.
I'm just a plane ride away. Well, we can talk about that.
So I would just like to thank you very much for responding to my pestering. All of the speakers here today took a fair amount of effort to get here, and it was an effort that I was happy to put forth because I think you all offered interesting perspectives. I hope that everybody's brains are full of good information and you made some good connections today. So let's give them one more round of applause, please.